Let us continue our discussion on Chapter 3, Class 12th NCRT Biology for your NEET entrance exam. The name of the chapter, as you are aware, is Human Reproduction, and the section that we are going to discuss in this video would be 3.2, the female reproductive system. We have already discussed 3.1, the male reproductive system, in the previous video. We both are aware that the NEET entrance exam is almost always exclusively based on the syllabus given in your NCRT textbook only. Now, I have already given you a word of caution that in some chapters I have seen that students actually try to overdo the things. They go at very great depths, and that is probably not required. The idea is to get all the basic concepts and facts given in NCRT, and even if we go outside the syllabus of the NCRT, our endeavor would be to understand what is written in NCRT in more clear terms. This is the basic thing that this is the basic strategy just before the exam that we are following. So with this in mind, let us begin the discussion on the female reproductive system. The first question that would come to mind is that is there a primary sex organ in females as well? So if you remember, the males had a primary sex organ, that was testes, and this primary sex organ in female would be ovaries. So there is a pair of them, ovaries. And why they are called as the primary sex organ? Because number one, they produce the gamete for the female sex, and we will call this gamete as either an ovum or an egg. And also these organs will also produce the hormone that will be responsible for the development of secondary sexual characters at the onset of puberty, and this would be a steroid hormone again, which is called as estrogen. So if we look at the similarity with the male reproductive system, testes was the primary sex organ, the gamete was sperm, and the hormone was androgen. The main androgen was testosterone. I hope this thing is absolutely clear. Now, like the male reproductive organs, the female reproductive organs are also present in the lower part of the abdominal cavity, what is called as the pelvic cavity. So they are also located in the pelvic cavity. But unlike the male reproductive system, where the primary sex organ, they developed in the lower abdominal cavity, which is called as the pelvic cavity, but they descended before birth into a sac-like structure which is outside the body, which is called as the scrotum. The ovaries are not going to descend, and therefore they will remain in the pelvic cavity. I hope this fundamental difference is now absolutely clear. Now, what keeps the ovaries in place? So there is a cavity, there are some organs which are called as ovaries. How they are kept in place, that would be the second question to discuss. First try to understand that ovary is an almond shaped organ. So let us try to draw a proper almond shaped structure. This is the structure of an ovary. This is an almond shaped organ, and it is attached to both uterus. It is attached to both uterus as well as the floor of the pelvis by what are called as ligaments. This would be the next question. So this is what is keeping ovaries in place. So I hope this question is now absolutely clear. So this is the ligaments that we are talking about. A, it is attached with the uterus. B, it is attached with the floor of the pelvic cavity, and therefore the ovary is kept in place. So pelvic wall as well as the uterus, the attachment is by ligaments, and it is keeping it in place. Now this ovary is covered by epithelium on its surface. So obviously the free surfaces of the body, as you are aware, are covered by epithelium. So the surface of the ovary is also covered by the epithelium. You know that this epithelium would be cuboidal epithelium. So this is the next question. Cuboidal epithelium covers the surface of the ovary. Now this cuboidal epithelium encloses what is called as the stroma. So the entire thing that is present inside the covering of the epithelium would be called as the stroma, and this is stroma of the ovary. So let us neglect the epithelium for some time. The stroma of the ovary would be divided into a central portion, would be divisible into a central portion. Let us take this color. The central portion which would be called as the medulla, and obviously the outer part would be called as the cortex. And when you see the ovary, what you would see is that in the medulla are present the blood vessels, the lymphatics, etc. They would be present in the medulla, and in the cortex there would be presence of large number of follicles in the varying stages of development. We will discuss about the follicles and their development in the later part on our discussion on this chapter, but this would be grossly the structure of the primary sex organ in the females, which is the ovary. Now, if there is a primary sex organ, are there other organs? Yes, obviously these all organs would be called as the secondary sex organs or the accessory sex organs. So what are they? So let us try to make a diagram that is actually given in your NCRT as well, and let us try to understand what it is. So this is the ovary. Now we are saying that one of the secondary organs would be the fallopian tube, which is also called as the oviduct. So that means now this is not a primary sex organ. We are calling it as oviduct. Oviduct can also be called as fallopian tube, and obviously there would be two fallopian tubes, one on either side. So because we know that there are two ovaries, so we are saying that there would be two fallopian tubes. Now this fallopian tube would it is around 12 to 13 centimeters in length, and this fallopian tube has various parts. Number one, the part that is very near to the ovary, this part is called as the infundibulum, and you can see that this infundibulum at the end, which is near the ovary, has some finger-like projections, and these finger-like projections are called as the fimbriae. So they are called as the fimbriae, and the ovum that is released from the ovary is released actually into the peritoneal cavity. Mind you, this is an important point. So that means the ovum is not directly released into the fallopian tube, it is released into the peritoneal cavity, and these fimbriae, they help in catching this ovum and transferring it into the oviduct. So this is a very important thing. Again, from animal tissues, you know that the lining epithelium will be ciliated columnar epithelium. So fallopian tubes are lined by ciliated columnar epithelium. Again, an important question. Now the second part would be, that means we are going away from the ovary. The second part would be the ampulla. Now you know that you have read the word ampulla in various chapters of your biology discussion. That means it must be a dilated part. So that means this is the part that is having the widest lumen, and this ampulla is the part of the fallopian tube which is the most common part where the fertilization takes place. So that means the sperm fertilizes the secondary oocyte in fallopian tube. This is the normal site of fertilization, and this is ampulla. Now, and once you go away from this, there is a narrower part, and this narrower part is called as, the third part is called as the isthmus. So this is isthmus. So therefore, when we are going from ovary and we are going away from the ovaries, this is infundibulum, then ampulla, and then the isthmus. And to be precise, the fertilization normally takes place at the junction of ampulla and isthmus, but even if it is at a junction, it must happen in one of the parts, and that part should be ampulla. Now what happens is that this isthmus opens into, so this isthmus opens into, let us try to create some symmetry here, and we are saying that this isthmus opens into what is called as the uterus. So this part is called as the uterus, and please try to understand the uterus in its non-pregnant form is anteverted. It is an inverted pear-shaped organ. What does it mean? So suppose this is the uterus it becomes anteverted, ANTEVERTED. So it is something like this. So it is folded upon itself, if I may say so. So that means this type of thing would be called as anteverted uterus. You can understand what we are doing here. This is folded upon itself like this. This is an inverted pear-shaped structure which is called as the uterus, and this would be the posterior wall of the uterus, and higher up this region would be called as the fundus of the uterus, and this is the site where most commonly implantation occurs and the pregnancy is established. So this is a uterus. Now the wall of the uterus has 3 layers. So what we are saying is that the wall of the uterus has 3 layers. So now we know a lot about oviduct. So let us remove this. The next question would be on the uterus, and we know that the wall of the uterus is actually having 3 layers. So let us draw in different colors. Let us say the outermost layer, let us take it bold. The outermost layer of the wall of the uterus would be called as the perimetrium. So this would be protective connective tissue. So this would be protective connective tissue. So that means the outermost part. So please remember this. This is from outside to inside. And if the chronology is asked, we are saying the outermost part would be perimetrium. And we are not surprised to find that this is a tough connective tissue. And we know that this would be protective in nature. Inside it, there is a layer of smooth muscle. So there is a layer of smooth muscles. So this would be the smooth muscle layer. Let us draw the second layer of the wall of the uterus. This would be what is called as the myometrium. So that means inner to perimetrium would be the myometrium. I told you that this myometrium would be made up of smooth muscles. The contraction of the myometrium would be responsible for the onset of the labor pains that will lead to the delivery of the child or the childbirth, which is called as parturition. So this is the layer that undergoes contractions, what are called as labor pains, and leads to the delivery of the baby, which is actually called as parturition. The innermost layer would be the endometrium. So this would be the epithelial lining. This would be called as the endometrium. So what we are saying is that the innermost lining would be the endometrium, and this endometrium, mind you, this is a very important question that we are saying, that in female we will see that there is a complex interplay between the gonadotropins and the gonadal steroids, FSH and SH from the anterior pituitary, and the estrogen and progesterone from the gonads, which is the ovaries. They are not secreted at a constant level. There is a cyclical interplay between them, and along with the cyclical changes in the secretion of the rates of these hormones by these two organs, simultaneously the endometrium will also undergo cyclic changes depending on the different timings of the menstrual cycle. And this is a very important thing. We will keep it in mind when we will be discussing the menstrual cycle, that this is the layer that undergoes the change. This is the layer that is actually shed during the menstrual flow as well. Now moving on, we will see that there is an opening here, and then it leads to a canal, and this canal would be called as the cervix. So this canal would be called as cervix, and this opening would be called as the internal os. So this opening would be called as the internal os. It leads to the cervix, and then at the end of the cervix there would be another opening, and then it will open into the vaginum. So these are the secondary sex organs in the female, and the cervix and the vaginum forms what is called as the birth canal. and at this opening is actually called as the external os. So I hope these things are now absolutely clear. The basics of the female reproductive organs are now absolutely clear. So as you can see that there is a continuum between these secondary organs or accessory organs in the female. You can see that these lumens are continuous. So we know that urinary tract infection are actually common, and in female, number one, the urethra is not very long in female, the UTI are common, and number two, any infection anywhere can actually ascend higher up into the reproductive organs and may reach the fallopian tube and cause scarring and leading to blockage of fallopian tube. Keep this in mind when I will be discussing reproductive health and a very important cause of infertility in females. So in the next chapter, just try to keep this in mind. So let us look at your NCRT, what NCRT says. So ovaries are the primary, so this is what NCRT is saying, that ovaries are the primary female sex organs that produce the female gamete, the ovum, and several steroid hormones, the ovarian hormones, and we say that the hormone that regulates the development of secondary sexual character would be estrogen. And on each side of the lower abdomen, we know this is called as pelvis, is about 2 to 4 centimeter in length and is connected to the pelvic wall, look at this, and uterus by ligaments. So that means to the pelvic wall and the uterus by ligaments, and each ovary is covered by a thin epithelium. We have talked about this epithelium, and which encloses the ovarian stroma. The stroma is divided into a cortex and an inner medulla, and we know that what is present in the cortex and what is present in the medulla. Now moving further, let us see what your NCRT says. So then it talks about the oviduct. The oviducts are also called as fallopian tubes, and then the uterus and the vagina constitute the female accessory ducts. Each fallopian tube is about 10 to 12 centimeter. We said that it is 12 to 13 centimeters and extends from periphery of each ovary to the uterus. The part closer to this is funnel shaped infundibulum, and we know that this has fimbriae which help in the collection of the ovum. The infundibulum leads to a wider part. We know that this would be ampulla, and then the last part is the isthmus, and isthmus opens into the uterus or joins the uterus. This is, I hope, absolutely clear. Then again, moving forward, we will see that uterus is single. So yes, the fallopian tubes are present on both sides. There are 2 ovaries. The uterus is single and is also called as the warm inverted pear-shaped structure. Again, ligaments. So uterus is also attached to the pelvic floor by ligaments. And there are 2 very important ligaments that you will learn in first year MBBS. One type of ligaments would be called as the peritoneal ligaments, and the second would be called as the broad ligament of the uterus. It virtually covers the entire uterus like a sheath and tries to fix it to the pelvic wall. So this is again supported by ligaments, and then there is cervix. Then we know about the cervical canal, and then the layers of the tissues that are present in the wall of the uterus, the perimetrium, the myometrium, and we know that what happens during the menstrual cycle. Now moving further, the NCRT again talks about another secondary sex character, secondary sex organ that is present in the female, and this would be the breast tissue. So the breast tissue is present in both male as well as female, but develops only in the females. So it's a part of the development of the secondary sexual characters. So it is actually a part of the development of secondary sexual characters. Now let us look at the gross anatomy of the mammary gland, and some of the important questions would be: number 1, that the mammary glands in the females are, let me just get the illumination right. When we go back to NCRT, I will have to dim it so that you are able to see properly. Number 1 would be that it is considered to be a modified sweat gland. So this may be an unusual thing, but please try to understand. Most people believe that it is actually a modified sweat gland, but Few of them argue that it may be a sebaceous gland, but please remember that largely it is believed to be a modified sweat gland. Now, the development of the breast tissue is a female secondary sexual character, and please remember that this breast tissue of the female would be divided into some lobes, so 15 to 20 lobes. So there would be 15 to 20 lobes in the female breast, and there would be lot of deposition of the fat tissue. So this is the deposition of the fat tissue, and this fat tissue will lead to the enlargement and giving the shape to the breast tissue in the female, and we are saying that there are large number of lobes, and these lobes will be filled by some alveoli. So sac-like structure, you know that these sac-like structures, they are called as the alveoli. So these are filled with alveoli. I hope this is absolutely clear. So the breast tissue is divided into lobes, and it has a lot of deposition of the fat tissue, and we are saying that it is actually filled with alveoli, sac-like structure. This structure would be producing the milk, will be secreting the milk. Now, going back to the diagram given in your NCRT, these are the lobes, and in the lobes you can see a large number of sac-like structure. They are called as alveoli, and then you see that these alveoli, they secrete milk. The milk goes into the mammary tubules, and from the mammary tubules, so let me dim it, let me just reduce the illumination. This would be better visible to you. So we are saying that as you can see that this is divided into large number of lobes, and then obviously this would be the body wall. We are looking at the ribs, and you can see the cut section of the ribs, and there would be intercostal muscles between ribs, you know, would be intercostal muscle, and then there would be the pectoralis muscle. There is a pectoralis major and pectoralis minor. So these are the pectoralis major muscle, and then we say that on it would be located the breast tissue, and we are seeing that the breast tissue is divided into lobes. The lobes are filled with alveoli, and then these alveoli through the mammary tubules go into the mammary duct. Then some of the mammary ducts join to form again a dilated region that would be called as an ampulla. Needless to say, ampulla would be a dilated part, and then some ampulla will join to form what are called as lactiferous duct, and the milk will be ejected from the breast tissue through the lactiferous duct. So you have to remember the sequence. So the sequence would be alveoli, the tubules, then the mammary duct, and then the ampulla, then the lactiferous duct, and through the lactiferous duct the milk will be ejected out of the breast tissue. So this is the sequence that they may ask you, the proper sequence of the duct system that is present in the human female breast tissue. Now going back to our own diagram, now we understand that this is the basic structure of the breast tissue in the human females, and please remember, let me remind you some physiology part of it. So we know that there are some very complex interactions of the hormones in the development of the breast tissue. One would be, always try to remember if there is a structural component to it. As I told you that this is one of the secondary sexual characters in the female. So the enlargement of the breast tissue, which is considered as a secondary sexual character, this would be basically estrogen. So we already know that estrogen is responsible for the development of breast tissue. So deposition of fat, the enlargement of the organ, this would be because of estrogen. Second, the hormone progesterone gives the apparatus or the organ its functional capability. Now please remember what I am saying. So the structural growth would be estrogen, the functional capability would be given by progesterone. Number 3, the actual secretion of milk would be done by prolactin. Would be because of the influence of prolactin. There is a placental hormone which is called as somatomamotropin as well, that would also be involved, but largely it will be because of prolactin. And finally the milk secreting apparatus, which is called as the alveoli, the alveolus, it is actually surrounded by what is called as a myoepithelial cell. So myoepithelial, that means this is a very modified epithelium that is able to contract, and this contracts under the influence of oxytocin. And you can easily understand, if oxytocin leads to the contraction of the myoepithelium cell, then it presses upon the alveoli and leads to the ejection of the milk from the breast tissue. So the final hormone that we are looking is oxytocin, and this oxytocin will be involved in milk ejection and milk letdown. So these are the informations that are given in your NCRT textbook in 3.2. When I come back, we will continue the discussion on the chapter, and we will continue with the section 3.3.